Konnichiwa, and welcome to another podcast of the NC Rowan Anime Group. I'm here with Charles Dumbar, a very knowledgeable man about Japanese culture and anime. Charles, what did you think of the Edo period?
Well, you're coming off of what was about 3 to 4 centuries worth of consistent war. And you got a Japan that, while there had been advances made in culture and literacy and art and education, was still stuck in this mindset at combat and battle were like a major way of life. So now you're coming to a period where you are an upwardly mobile merchant class. You have coming to a period where literacy and education are being universally applied. You're coming into a period where money and merit become more important than station. You're coming into a period where, as long as you weren't a samurai, because samurai had a different set of rules, you were not restricted in how far you could advance. It was an exciting time to be alive. It was an exciting time to be part of Japan. And you have a Japan that was still searching for a new identity. Unfortunately, their response to that new identity was to close their borders down midway through the period because they were afraid of outside influences poisoning or overcoming or destroying their way of life. But you have a period that for 2.5 centuries was peaceful. You have a period that for 2.5 centuries was emphasized growth, emphasized harmony, and emphasized education on a level that had never been seen before, and that's pretty powerful.
What about the Meiji reconstruction?
Well, the Meiji era, it's fairly simple. The problem with the Edo period is that the Edo era came to an end when Japan literally did go into isolationism, and Japan was not paying attention to other countries, which is dangerous. And then with the arrival of the Americans and the black ships and all that scary stuff, it scared Japan. Japan didn't know how to handle this because they were still living in a feudal society while the rest of the world had passed them by. So they could have gone to pieces and fallen apart, or they did what they actually did. They turned around and modernized the nation like that. They turned around and they, instead of building on what they knew, they borrowed things from Europe. They borrowed things from America. They borrowed technology. They borrowed medicine. They borrowed educational systems. They borrowed words. The term emperor didn't rise to prominence in Japan until that period. Up until then, they were known as the Tenno, beloved of heaven. They were not emperors yet. They evoked these emotions and these imagery tied in with Western empires, and they built a modern nation that, though it led them again into trouble like 100 years down the line, it was the nation they needed to avoid being swallowed up by, like Great Britain did with China and India. They needed a nation that was free, and they needed a nation that was good for them. So how did they do it? They did it with incredible modernization. Unfortunately, they also did it at the expense of their folk culture and at the expense of their old culture, which would eventually come back to bite Japan in the ass much, much later.
Mm-hmm. What do you... I know about the Dutch. They had a small little song that...
Nagasaki.
Do you know anything about the Dog Emperor?
What?
The Dog Emperor.
No, I don't.
He was the emperor who was born in the year of the dog, and what happened was they passed a law, if the dog died, you had to bury it.
Well, that just makes sense. You respect the dead. I mean, I can understand that. I mean, there is a bit of superstitious lot going on there, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was a thing. I really wouldn't be surprised if that was a thing. This is the first time hearing of it, though.
There's an old joke. This guy was taking his dog up to get buried. He said, be fortunate that he was not born in the year of the horse, or our burden would be more heavier indeed.
I have heard that one. But yeah, I mean, Japan has quirky superstitions. Every culture has quirky superstitions, so I wouldn't be surprised if that actually was a decree.
What do you know about Roaring Thunder?
Which one was Roaring Thunder? Oh, you mean Raijin?
Yeah.
Well, Raijin is the kami of lightning and thunder and storms, and he's so old. I mean, in the beginning there was a primordial force, and that primordial force hired Raijin and Fujin, the winds and the rains, to blow away the mists and cover the ground in water so that life could exist. Raijin and Fujin, despite being kami, are typically depicted as oni because they lived before there was a human form to emulate. So Raijin and Fujin are terrifying, they're angry, but they're also necessary. Without the presence of Raijin and Fujin, the world would be a much darker, drier, abysmal place to live.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to end it right here. Thank you for taking the time to do this podcast. Bye-bye.